Hello, everybody. So, in this video, I want to address race war. I know, I want to say about a year ago, I was in a couple of different groups in social media, and I do debate with people. I do try to get other people's point of view on different topics. I listen to other people's arguments. I also put out my arguments as well. And, not long ago, and it wasn't just last year, this was an ongoing thing for a number of years. There were individuals talking about a race war. And I'm not sure if YouTube took those videos down yet, but if you were to Google it, you'd probably see videos popping up left and right, either about, discussing race wars or certain individuals saying, hey, they're well armed and ready, to mow down other people. And in a lot of these debates, when I was talking with these people, I was like, it's kind of weird that a lot of you are willing to gun down your fellow, countrymen, especially over race, which is stupid, and I'll try to cover that in another video. But I want to talk about race war because there were those, some, I guess, big-headed individuals who thought that, we had the manpower, we had the guns, we could survive a race war or potentially even win one. And, having been an actual soldier myself, and knowing about the different types of warfare, I could, comfortably say that one, a race war has been ongoing for quite some time now, and two, wars can be fought without a single shot being fired. And not understanding that concept of war is why, to some degree, we're falling behind and losing. So, what do I mean by race war? Well, it's not singled out, to one race. It's more of a class war. It's more of a class war. However, it's mainly the minorities that suffer, and there are, Caucasian people who suffer with us as well, or not necessarily with us, but suffer alongside us as well. And again, if you know anything about war, some people are expendable. They're accepted casualties. When generals send soldiers off like myself, to war or whatever, I'm expendable. All of the, men and women that I served alongside with, they're expendable. Those generals don't come out there and fight with us. They're high value personnel. They have some importance or whatever. So in this particular war, low class individuals, poor people, poor Caucasians are collateral damage, I guess. They're the pawns that are sacrificed, for this war. And it's crazy because, some of them go real hard with the racism and bigotry and ignorance and all of that stuff. But I want to get into it. So this is a war being fought on many fronts. And here's how, and this is just my, my theory, with some supporting evidence. But here's how, so there are different types of warfare. If if you are prior military or know anything about the military, you'll know that we have special operations, for guerrilla warfare, which is a different type of warfare than, conventional forces are used to fighting. You have what is it? Economic warfare. You have psychological warfare. You got all that dark stuff that the CIA and some of them other no-name government agencies do. And there are a lot of examples of that stuff throughout history. If you look at Africa, I'm not saying that the CIA is directly behind it because who knows, but being able to turn people against themselves and pretty much bring themselves down, or to manipulate things in such a way that the government collapses. I think we got a crisis going on now in Venezuela or something like that. So there are examples of this, and I want to touch on some of the examples that are being used against us, us minorities and us poor people. Or I don't really want to classify myself as poor people. I'm coming up. I'm grateful. I'm still struggling, but there are people who are struggling way worse than me. So I've been there, and I thank God I am where I am now. But I just want to address a couple things. So in psychological warfare, if you hear something enough, like if you actually Google psychological operations, whether it be performed by the CIA or the military or whatever, one of the primary means is through media, through radio broadcasting, through news broadcasting. It could be music, it could be pamphlets, whatever. The point is that you put that message out to a targeted audience, to change their views in your favor. Your favor may be to turn them against each other. Your favor may be to have them work with you. It just depends on what your agenda is. So I want to dig into the psychological part of this race war. Now, a lot of this mainly pertains to people of color. We've had good music in the past, and I mean, I'm going to have some pretty rough opinions about, how our music is now. But we've had some good music in the past, especially when you pull up a lot of the oldies, the old school songs and stuff like that. We've had some good music, my dad, used to play a lot of old school, oldies. And, I kind of got hooked on that coming up, but I also listened to everything that was, modern during my time. A lot of rap music and stuff like that. And, this isn't to bash those individuals, but, we had songs coming out, like, I'm a Thug by Trick Daddy, or, Big Pimpin' by Jay-Z. Because I Got High, by Afro Man. And, and those are just a few examples of so many songs, and it's not just the title, but it's the lyrics that are in those songs as well. There's a number of music videos that you can that you can check out, and it'll, reference pimping or reference being a thug, or gangster life, or shooting, or murder, or rape. And when you think about it, and the music industry knows that our youth is listening to that music, and it's targeted toward our people. I don't hear Caucasian songs glorifying, serial killers, or white collar criminals, or In a lot of our songs, there is a lot of talk about drugs and stuff like that. I have yet to hear songs about meth labs and you know, popping pills out of cabinets and all that stuff. And that's kind of stereotypical, but in comparison, we're sitting here literally talking about killing each other. You know, calling our females all different kinds of names and stuff like that. Matter of fact, what was it? Kaya, who had that song, "My Neck, My Back." There were songs dropped by Little Kim and a lot of other artists. That doesn't depict our women in a good light, and it doesn't. It's not. They hear it enough, and it becomes a part of them. Certain things they believe. How many times we as black people, some of us have heard people quoting Tupac, and siding with him and things like that, because of what he said, you know. So, we're the only people whose music is literally encouraging ourselves to tear ourselves down, and the record companies are pushing that out. Are there people out there who can sing good songs? Yeah, even in R&B, a lot of that stuff is about sex. Versus the lovemaking songs that a lot of the people in the past used to make. Or just expressing how much you love a female now. Now these females ain't nothing but you listen to that. Another part of the psychological part is how we're portrayed. And I'm pretty sure there's been some kind of legal violations in this, which I'm going to cover in another video. But how we're portrayed in the media, how we're portrayed in Hollywood, a lot of the times we're the bad guys, we're the thugs, we're the drug dealers. Everything that's been portrayed in the songs, a lot of times that's what we're portrayed as, on television, on the news. I literally watched, excuse me. I literally watched the news, and I would see how Caucasian fans of a sports team would riot and trash cars and set things on fire, and they would be portrayed as overexcited fans or something like that. And then you see rioting from unjust police shooting or something like that, and then it's like, oh, these thugs and these hoodlums and so on and so forth, and when the media is constantly portraying us in a particular light and other individuals, you got to remember, a lot of us grow up or have grown up, watching the news, watching television. That's a constant thing that's being put in people's minds, is that, black people are negative, they're violent, they're thugs, they're this and that, and then let's have a little bit more understanding for this person, so on and so forth. So we're constantly dehumanized by the media. And, if they're not giving equal treatment, if they're not, if they're referring to a black person who committed murder in a certain type of way, but not committing or not referring to a white person or whomever in the same way, that makes us all look bad, especially when you do it over and over and over again every night, for years and years. Then you got too much coverage on things that happen in urban areas and stuff like that. There are plenty of domestic violence cases in the suburbs. There are plenty of drug-related cases in the suburbs. I know for a fact that there are grow houses in the suburbs. Then you also have people coming from the suburbs to the urban areas to pick up drugs that they use, so on and so forth. And with all of these, stop and frisk things that's going on, and narcotics units, performing constant surveillance, a lot of those guys aren't getting busted, but it is what it is. So too much coverage focused on, what happens in the urban areas. A lot of stuff happens in the urban areas because you have a lot of desperate people, in a lot of cases, not all, that are crammed together with minimum resources. Things are going to happen. Things also happen in the suburbs, but the cops aren't responding to that. The cops aren't, strictly addressing those issues. So it's not heard of, it's underreported. You will find a lot of battered wives, in the suburbs. You will find a lot of people who are addicted to, various drugs in the suburbs, and even drug dealers and drug pushers. It's not us that's flying that stuff into this country. You know what I mean? We don't have the airplanes and, all of that stuff. And that's part of it also, the undercoverage of the things that should matter. There's a lot of positive stuff that goes on in these cities. People trying to make a difference. People trying to get messages out. In regards to these police shootings and stuff like that, there have been cops that have tried to speak out. That have reached out to media sources. I know this for a fact, and the media isn't really paying attention to the cops who want to speak out, against police corruption and so on and so forth, but it has no problem making us look like the bad guys. So the media plays a big role, as well as our music and, the things that we participate in. We definitely participate in it. And maybe in another video, I can get more in depth in that, but I'm gonna move on. So another type of warfare, that we face is economic warfare. And if you go into a lot of these urban areas, I'd say 40, 50, 60 years ago, I'm not gonna say it was great, but our grandparents, and great grandparents were doing much better by comparison than some of us are today. Grandpa had a job, probably didn't even have a high school education, but he had a job, maybe even had two jobs. Grandma had a job. They both had a lot of babies. And I mean, this is, true for a lot of families, not necessarily all, but they were still able to buy a house, and obtain work, without, in some cases, without a high school education, and in some of these cases, they were able to retire from these jobs, and possibly collect, a reasonable, pension, for those times or whatever. Now we have to pay for, well, first off, now there's a lot of those jobs that no longer exist, with the car factories, all different kinds of factories and warehouses and stuff like that, in urban areas that have been shut down. I know you can go back to Philadelphia and you can see a lot of those factories are still there. They've been abandoned for decades, So, so the jobs aren't available, and I have notes. So, if you see me looking down, I have notes. The cost of living constantly increases every year. If you've lived in an apartment, and I don't know if all apartments do this, but all of the apartments that I have lived in has done this. The rent goes up every year. It constantly increases, whereas pay doesn't, and even if it did, pay does not match, how much the cost of living is. This isn't like, before, 9/11 when, gas was, more affordable and food and certain resources were more affordable. This stuff is more expensive now, and I know other people have noticed this. They've cut back on some of those products. It's not the same quality as it was before. You're not getting as much as you was before. Qualifications for jobs has changed. You used to need, like I said before, our grandparents were able to get jobs without a college or without, education, sometimes without a high school education, Then it was like, yo, you have to get your high school education if you want to get a job. Then it was like, oh, you got to get your associates if you want to get a job. Then it was, so on and so forth. And a lot of schools even used to offer trade skills. They don't do that anymore, you know. So now you're having to come out of pocket in a lot of cases with money that you don't have to acquire the skills or acquire the training or knowledge that's needed to qualify for the better paying jobs that you're seeking. And, with the qualifications constantly changing and getting harder, that's not easy for a lot of people to do. And then not only that, it doesn't guarantee you the job. You have a lot of people out here with college degrees that aren't employed, or they're not making nowhere near enough money to survive off of. But yet they have school loans with ridiculous interest rates. That is constantly adding on to how much they owe. And then you also have the justice system. So the justice system in itself is just a money machine, period. A lot of the prisons are private prisons, or for profit or whatever. You have judges that are paid off. This isn't a secret. To purposely send people to jail, and obviously, police are more focused in urban areas. They're more focused in poor areas. Even though people tend to use drugs, about the same rate, there are only, by comparison, African Americans and Latinos are the greater population, even though we're a minority in this country. So you're talking about when you get arrested. Now you got to have bail money. If you got any kind of decent legal representation, you're covering your lawyer's fees. You're covering court costs. All of these different things. Time lost from work if you're employed. You may even lose your job, and if you're incarcerated for a long period of time, that affects your family if you have one, and it puts a financial strain on them, which puts them in more of a hardship. And it's crazy because people can get locked up for the pettiest things these days. Uh-oh. In between the courts and lawyers and lost wages, the criminal justice system alone is a substantial hit to people's finances. That's not even including traffic citations, and fines for whatever other reasons. So there's another topic. I'm gonna continue this in a part 2 video, because there are other forms of warfare that we are that is against us, and we're failing to address it, and we're not even prepared for it, and it takes such a drastic change to combat this type of war. Everybody, when you say war, people are thinking about guns and so on and so forth. This is way more effective. If we were to count the casualties, it would be ridiculous how many people have been dead without whoever those who have that agenda actually firing a shot. So I will continue this with a part 2.